don't know if I'm audible, if somebody can give me a confirmation.
Yes, Ashmita, hi.
Hello. Hi, Sanjana. Hi, Vidit. Uh, so everyone, let me introduce you to your speakers of the day, whom you will be interacting with. So we have with us here Vidit. Vidit is one of our star lineup of consultants, whether it be the most traditional applicant or somebody from an absolutely completely non-conventional backgrounds. Vidit has produced some of our best case studies, and of course he's an alum of INSEAD. And welcome back, Sanjana. Always a pleasure to host you here. Sanjana is going into the school that Vidit has left behind. So Sanjana is now at INSEAD. She is one of our proudest anomalies. She got a GMAT of 680 and got into INSEAD in round 3, right, Sanjana? Round 3, with a scholarship, by the way. So that was the anomaly that she came from. It has been a pleasure working with Sanjana and with it here, and I will pass the mic on to them so that they can introduce themselves to you. If we could start with you.
Thanks a lot, Shmita, for such a kind introduction. And yes, as she pointed out, so my name is Vidit, graduated INSEAD last year, and now working as a consultant in the sports industry. Before INSEAD, I was working with the government of Canada, so I was coming from a bit of a public sector, non-traditional background. Yeah, over to you, Sanjana.
Nice to meet you, Vidit. It's always great to meet other INSEAD alums.
Same here.
And Ashmita, it's always fun to do one of these with you. I worked in KPMG for 6 years in tech consulting in India. And I think Ashmita's already talked about my journey in brief. But yeah, I'm currently at INSEAD. I'm at the Fontainebleau campus. It's been almost 2 months. And I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you all have of what the world is like inside of the INSEAD experience.
Thank you so much, Sanjana and Vidit. And of course, as you all know, today's session is about everything INSEAD. So we're going to start off with what is probably the most burning question as of now, which is that the R2 deadlines are nearing. They are almost just a month away. And with this, would you say that it's a reasonable expectation to begin today? And if so, how much effort, how much time would you say an applicant would need to put in to be able to crack the admit? So, Sanjana, if you could start.
So honestly, round 2, I think Ashmita said, I was a round 3 admit, but it's a pretty competitive space from then onwards. But round 2, I think your chances are still a lot stronger. You are, after round 1, round 2 is probably the next best shot to optimize your chances in terms of an acceptance as well as scholarship. And so I think those of you that have scores or are probably at the final stages of taking your GMAT, it's a great round for you all to kind of start applying towards, because after that, I would say it starts getting a bit tough and way more competitive. So round 2 is a really, really good round. Your options are still open. Do probably, do a profile, do a call with the experts here, with the profile experts, and get some feedback on your applications if you haven't already. And I think it's going to be very helpful for you guys to power through and push through to apply to round 2.
Perfect. And with it, according to you, is it a reasonable timeline? And if so, what kind of effort are we looking at for round 2 here?
Yeah, I think as Sanjana pointed out earlier, so there's 2 things. So, the first, I think if there is a reasonable time for you guys to get started on the application. However, there is the only thing I would suggest is to get started on it ASAP. So, I wouldn't recommend waiting for like 2 weeks or like a week and a half before the deadline to get started on, because that wouldn't make sense. the application is quite long. You need to go through a little bit of self, retrospection in your life, what you have done, what you've achieved for the past 10 years. That takes a little bit of time. So I think it's a reasonable time to get started. However, it's important to know that you need to get started right away. And I think that's one of the other things you guys, Ashmita and Sanjana can touch base on as well, that, we are here to help. We are here to, be with you in these, even if you guys don't have a lot of time in hand, but we provide enough support and resources in our hand to help you expedite this process. So I think, yes, reasonable time, but I would suggest getting started on it ASAP, because it's probably the biggest application that you would come across for any MBA school in comparison.
Thanks, Vidit. It is one of the largest applications. For those of you who haven't registered on INSEAD's website, haven't checked out the applications yet, to do so. And that's how you will know that you must begin now, because you'll almost be writing a novella for your submission. With it, another aspect that I just want to understand, and of course we'll get to Sanjana with this, because Sanjana's experience with scholarships was quite successful as well. What is the typical assumption is that as you go forward in rounds, your scholarship chances reduce. At this point of time, applying to R2, what is a scholarship realistic and usual? And B, what should be the strategy for a scholarship application?
So very straightforward answer to your straightforward question for part A. Yes, it's very realistic, and you can get scholarship. You don't have to sort of think that there won't be any scholarship left or anything like that. So it's fine. Coming to your point B, what the strategy should be, I think the strategy is very straightforward, as you would have for round one, because they do reserve a large amount of funds for individual rounds. Of course, more for round one and round two. There's not a lot of differentiation in scholarship amount between round and round two, to be really honest. So really, you have to first of all understand, what kind of scholarship categories do you guys come from or belong to. So there's diversity scholarship, there's scholarship for, I think, for even public sector, scholarship for women. So identify what scholarship would be best suitable for you and for your background, and then just you have to write the essays and prepare accordingly. But a lot of people have questions, but as said, there's not a lot of difference between round one and round two, either application stage or scholarship stage.
All right, perfect. That explains in a very straightforward manner what I was asking. Sanjana, what's your experience been like? Because I'm sure applying for scholarship in round 3 must have had its own challenges. So how did you go about it? What was the process that you followed?
Absolutely. I think when I was applying, also a lot of people had already kind of mentally prepared me to not expect, any substantial scholarships. Round one, round two are definitely way more competitive. And even when I was applying, the kind of options that were available in round three for INSEAD, there were only diversity scholarships available. So the other ones that Vidit actually mentioned right now, those usually stop at round two. So the variety that you have in terms of the scholarships that you can apply for go down considerably by the time you're doing round three. The only one that was open for INSEAD was the diversity one. And I think for the other schools I applied to as well, I vaguely remember that there weren't really very many options available in round three. So the pool definitely becomes tougher in that sense. There are fewer scholarships. And that's why I think more than even just the competitiveness of your application, the scholarship itself, I really tell people just go for round one, round two if you can do it.
Makes perfect sense. I would just like to add on one aspect that Vidit touched upon, which is shortlisting your scholarships. I've seen a lot of people get extremely overwhelmed by the number of scholarships that are available, and it is and the different kinds of versions and where you can apply and what you can apply with. It is important for you to assess this right at the beginning. Don't get overwhelmed by it. There are so many different categories where most of us don't even fit. We fit into 2, 3 specific scholarships. All you need to do is work to narrow it down. Sit with your consultant, ask for help, figure it out. With applications, that is what we constantly emphasize. Please ask for help. It is a massive task, and it is absolutely fine to take advice, suggestions, direction, proper structured help from somebody who's done this before. So I would encourage you to focus on that and not get overwhelmed. It is not most of the things for one individual, all scholarships do not apply. So moving on to from now that we have scholarship covered and a successful scholarship application, what about a successful application in general as a whole? So in your experience, maybe Sanjana, since you've gone through this process very recently, maybe you could tell us what should be focused on in an application to INSEAD that makes it a holistic, successful application.
I think, like we also discussed, the INSEAD application is supremely extensive. Like it's really long, probably the longest one. I spent a lot of time on my INSEAD application because each question is very different from each other. And they're really looking at qualities like your professional strengths, your personal motivations, your personal qualities. So there's a lot of different things that you can cover in terms of actually showing who you are as a person. It's not restricted to just, 2 essays and a GMAT score where that kind of weightage and emphasis is on your GMAT score. It really is about some of the experiences that you have had in the past, what exposure, your background, your diversity you can bring to the business school. And so I think that's some of the key areas that, at least in INSEAD, they're looking at. They're looking at the diversity perspective. They're looking at your professional achievements. They're definitely looking at what are some of your personal motivations, your long-term goals, and how INSEAD itself as a brand name and as an institution can help you get to that point. So I think those are some of the key things that I worked on, at least when I was applying. I saw there was a question as well, with a low GMAT score, I'd say it was just more important for me to emphasize some of the qualities and strengths that I had and why I would be a good fit at the business school. So I think those are really the keys of just having a strong application. And of course, needless to say, I worked with MBA and Beyond as well. So my narrative, my story was very clear from the get-go. I knew what was the storyline, what was the perspective that I wanted to show in my applications. And then I kept it pretty much consistent in my interviews with the schools that I was applying to. So in that sense, and it was also very genuine and authentic to who I was. So it wasn't as if I needed to really prepare too hard, because I knew I was just putting forward the best version of myself in front of them after the multiple discussions I had with, of course, my counselor, but also the other people at MBA and Beyond.
Makes perfect sense. An aspect of applications that keep coming up is what you want to put forward, and I think so much of it also helps, apart from going through your profile with your consultant, working with your consultant. Another aspect is to sit down and think about, honestly, why do you want to go to INSEAD? I mean, not just because it is literally one of the best schools in the world, but what else? What will it give you? Those aspects really bring out, for any school, it brings out key elements of your application really, really well. Any aspect with it that you think should be kept in high focus? One of the maybe 3 most important things that one should consider while submitting their application to INSEAD.
I think one of the things that I would probably say while working on an application, well, for any MBA application, is don't get too overwhelmed or get stressed. And I think that's the most important part, because anybody can write those applications and the essays, but people tend to get really stressed out when they have to write those specific, answers to those questions, because they're not 100% sure what they are looking for, and they get very conscious of what they want to write or what they want to showcase themselves in front of the admissions committee. So I think that's one sort of mistake that a lot of applicants do. So the first, I would suggest just being very authentic and be true to yourself when you're writing the application. So that's more important. Second, of course, don't put too much stress on your GMAT and the quantitative and the qualitative or whatever, all these scores and grades, because at the end of the day, they are judging based on your entire sort of application, not just one data point. And plus, European B schools tend to be more focused on what you have achieved, experience, as Sanjana has already said before. So I won't repeat that, right? And then the third thing, which is also important, even from my experience, from my friends from the batches as well, once you have submitted the application, don't ponder too much on it. You're done with it, and then prepare for your interviews well enough. So, for example, one time I worked with a candidate. She was preparing for the interviews. Her first interview did not go down really well, but her second interview was really good, and then she ended up getting an admit from INSEAD. So there wouldn't be any point pondering over anything that you've already submitted, like the application or your interviews. Do your best. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't get stressed. Of course, take your time to work with your consultant. And generally, what I would recommend is once you're done with the application, take a step back for a day or two, then come back and revisit what you have written, and then discuss it with the consultant so you get a better perspective and understanding. What's valuable in the application, what needs to be taken out, or what needs to be massaged.
Perfect. That makes absolute sense. For those of you wondering which interviews Vidit was talking about, INSEAD's application is as stressful as the interviews are. So they have 2 alumni interview that happens as opposed to the one that most European schools do. So just a heads up there. But right now, I think November 7th deadline is on key focus. So one step at a time. My next question is, we have been talking about not focusing too much on the GMAT or GRE score. While completely agreed, that definitely is, one aspect, and it is only one aspect of the application. However, it is an important part as well. There's no denying the fact that GMAT and a GRE, a good GMAT and GRE score doesn't hurt. So for those who are seeing low GMAT GRE and have not yet started the preparation for their for November 7th application, so they are not in the most comfortable position right now. Would you say that they should prioritize this round of applications? Would you say they should focus on improving their score, or apply in round 3 or January 25 intake? How would you go about it? And if at all there is a standardized answer to this? Sanjana, if you could start with you.
I think if I was also in that same boat. Just a while back, I applied in Jan. I think I took the GMAT in Jan, applied in Jan. And I was in the same boat. I did not have the GMAT score that I wanted. But one thing I was very sure of is I wanted to apply to INSEAD. That was my dream school. And so I actually started working on my application well before. I think October onwards. I'd already started work. September, I signed up. October, I started work on my application because that was sure in my mind I needed to go. And I parallelly started studying and preparing for my GMAT. So I'd suggest that, you have, even now, listening to the deadline, there's still a month left. If you are systematic and start working on your application little by little today, and maybe put more emphasis there on preparing for your GMAT and try and clear that in the next couple of weeks, it's that the recommended approach that I would suggest to anybody else, mostly because we've already emphasized why round 2 is a great round for you to apply in with maximum chances. After round 2, it starts getting a little tough. So I would actually just tell people, don't, because the stress levels then that you have when you apply to round 3, like me, are a lot more. The stakes are a lot higher. It is way more riskier, because if it's not round 3, then it's another year. So round 2, you're really able to get some of your acceptances and then you know what you want to do for next steps. And I would rather, I highly recommend people to just go for it in round 2. But having said that, do make sure that you have the best version of your score and your application ready for it. So I think if you start working in time, discuss with your counselors, you all might be in a pretty good shape to meet the deadline even now.
All right, makes perfect sense. With it, what's your opinion on this?
No, I second that opinion. However, I do want to add one more thing. So a lot of times, applicants tend to have everything good in the buckets, but still they're not very confident or they're not organized. So it's very possible that you can have all the eggs in your basket, but you still won't be able to, hash out a good application. And the only reason in that case would be just the way how you organize, or just not being confident enough that you will be good for the application round. So I think it's important to keep up that confidence while you're working through the application. As we have said before, like everybody has said, right? Like we do have enough time. There's reasonable time to work through it. Don't emphasize too much on the GMAT score, because again, that's just one data point. There's a whole other aspect of the application that they will be keenly looking at, like your, strengths, weaknesses, your stories, your backgrounds, what kind of value you will bring to the batch, and after graduation, how will you continue to contribute to the INSEAD. So those are the things they specifically look for, and I don't think you need a lot of time to prepare for those aspects of it, right? So I think if you have a reasonable GMAT score, go for it. Of course, like if it's 100 out of 800, then that's a different story. Then I wouldn't recommend. But I don't think anybody would get 100 out of 800. But yeah, I don't think that's a point to be stressed about too much. Got a reasonable GMAT score. I think it's time to move on to the application part then. The
I
essay
think
part, sorry.
the key aspect here is reason. If you have reasonable scores, if you're reasonably prepared, if you have a reasonable understanding of what you want to do with this application, where you are applying, what you want out of an MBA, then go forward with it. One of the aspects that I would like to highlight is a lot of times we look at schools and how they choose candidates as almost like a military shortlisting process. While that's not the case, business schools are actually, before you join in, quite reasonable. After that, they get strict, yes. But while they are bringing you on board, they're quite reasonable. They understand human aspects, especially European schools, really, really well. And if you are able to highlight from your profile who you are as a person, and your GMAT score is low because of any reasonable reasons, you're fine. You're not in a bad shape. So it is these checkpoints that we keep for ourselves is only improving our odds. It is just the amount of work in the right direction that you put in. And for that right direction, I think it is key to work with somebody who knows what they're doing. So before working on your applications, to discuss with your consultant in detail about all aspects of your profile, and then go forward with it. And I don't see why it should be a problem, depending on the basis of what both Sanjana and Vidit here mentioned. So these were my questions from you all, but there are quite a few questions from others. And what I will request the participants is to start raising your hands and come on to the camera and speak. Perfect. These hands raised already. I will just take a couple of questions from the chat and then we'll go on to the people who have raised their hands. So first question is from Avinash. He says that INSEAD website mentions WorkX range of its current batch as 2 to 8 years. I have WorkX of 9 years. How much of a disadvantage does that bring to the application? Sanjana, Vidit, whoever would like to take it.
Oh, you can go first, Sanjana.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I don't think so. Straight up. There's no disadvantage with more years of experience, I'd say. It's always a plus. It's you are going to meet people with those many years of experience as well. I think usually it's just an average. It's while it might be a range, that's only because I think the recent years that has come down a bit, but you will find a lot of people with more years of experience as well. We also have, INSEAD is a great opportunity for you while you're on campus to not just network with your current batch, but also to network with people that are coming in for the exec MBAs, people that are coming for all the other programs as well. And of course, you're part of the INSEAD network. Plus, you'll be surprised with WorkX. There's also just the kind of work that people are doing, the different backgrounds they come from, that more years of WorkX does not necessarily mean that, or lesser years of WorkX in that case, with as your peers might have, do not mean that your learning is stalled. It's just the fact that they come from such diverse backgrounds. You will still be learning from them. And that's usually the main, I think, aim of when you're sitting in a classroom with so many people.
Perfect. Absolutely. Another question that has come up is, does INSEAD look at individual verbal and quant GRE scores, or looks at the combined scores? Would you like to address this one?
I think this goes back to, again, just the discussion we had before. So of course, when they look at the score, they will look at the overall score, and they will also maybe take a glance at the individual sections as well. But having said that, again, that's just one very small data point. Especially when you're targeting European B school, I think there's other important part of the application that you need to be focused on. Something that we've already discussed. So I wouldn't take too much time on it. So don't ponder too much on your GRE or GMAT or whatever other scores you have to gather together. I know for your high school or whatever. Work through the application. I think that's the most important part of the entire application process.
Absolutely. It is, Ram, it is just one part. I know everybody is concerned about this, but please treat it as one aspect. Don't treat it as the entire application itself. Sanjana, there is this question that is directed very specifically to you. Arjun is asking, in retrospect, what do you feel were the top reasons for your admit, given your low GMAT and application in round 3?
Every person's application and experience is different, but I'll tell you this much. When I say INSEAD was my dream school, it really was. I think I probably knew 2 years before I even applied that I wanted to go for my MBA in a few years. And I knew that the work that I was doing and everything and all the decisions I was making was a choice I was doing actively for one day applying to a business school. So I think if I were to say, maybe my GMAT might not have been the best on a particular day, but the work that I put in for applying to a business school went way beyond just the work I put in for my GMAT. At work, I was able to secure an out-of-term promotion. I was probably the youngest and fastest moving employee in my division. I was already leading a team of about 8 to 10 people, working on global projects with revenue targets. So which gave me the opportunity to interact with teams that were not just based in India, but outside of India as well. So work-wise, I knew that I was doing pretty well, and that was also the focus and emphasis at that point for me. So I think that may have worked pretty well in my favor. The kind of responsibility that I was already carrying, the promotions, the ratings that I was getting, the awards I was getting at work. And of course, all of this was not just in straight up consulting, but I was in tech consulting, which was slightly different. So it was a little bit more niche and also, a growing line now. And then the second thing I'd say that worked really well for me, maybe in my application, is that with the INSEAD application, there are also 4 video essays that you need to submit, which is basically where you are given about 30-40 seconds to come up with an answer and speak for a minute on a random topic that is shown to you on the screen. So while, of course, I worked really hard on my application, the 4 questions that I answered, I think till date, I am very proud of the answers that I gave, because I think I was able to give them some really good answers to those questions and not get nervous in the stressful environment that it creates to just answer in a minute. So I think that might have worked pretty well in my favor as well from an application standpoint.
Perfect. So those were 2 points. Do you want to give one more?
Usually I would like to say interview as well, but I think with interviews and INSEAD interviews for me were probably the toughest interviews. And I know we had touched upon it for a bit, but yes, I had a similar experience where one of my interviews was really good and one of my interviews was very hard for me to read and tell. But like he said, that you just have to put your best foot forward in the interviews. I did the prep that went for it. I knew, and I think the most important thing when you're doing interviews as well is why you are going to INSEAD, how it's going to help you, and what you want from it, and how you will contribute. So I knew very well the role that I would play in that ecosystem and what I wanted from this experience. And that was, I think, that was probably, I would say, and is going to be for anybody applying to a business school, that is the ceiling deal for it.
Makes perfect sense. So that rounded out everything. Thanks, Sanjana. Now let me call upon other people to ask the questions. Deepshika, if you could. Thank you.
Hey, hi Sanjana, hi Vidit. Thank you for taking out the time and answering the questions. I think a lot of the questions have been answered in what Sanjana mentioned. But I had a very specific question. How did you narrow down on INSEAD? Is it something that you made a decision because of your post-MBA career trajectory? Like, how did you show your passion for INSEAD? Because I know that is a bit of a needle mover. And if you can also help me understand what is INSEAD looking for, right? What's because again, the template people who get in and then you sort of stand out as an anomaly. So what worked for you? I mean, of course, your work experience is tremendous, but if you can shed some light on what is INSEAD also looking for, that would be super helpful.
Okay, so what INSEAD is looking for, I'll first probably touch upon that. I think, honestly, they are looking for anybody that just comes from a different perspective. They really are not a template-driven school. I'm sure Vidit will also want to add to this because I'd love to also hear his perspective. But they are not. No one person here is the same, honestly speaking. We are not all copies of the same template. Genuinely speaking, there are people that are in my classroom that are from the military, that are doctors from the pharmaceutical background, healthcare. There are also chefs that have worked, in ITC, for example, a dear friend of mine. So there are all types of people in my classroom, cybersecurity, lawyers. And so I think the main point of INSEAD is, and what they're really in class, and this is now that I am in INSEAD, I probably understand better. They're really a more value-driven MBA school. They really are emphasizing that INSEAD is about celebrating the kind of diversity you bring and hopefully adding and contributing to making the world a better place. So that's what they're really looking for in your application. They're not looking for, while of course, yes, great GMAT scores, great academics, so that you're able to keep up with the fast-paced nature. But they're really just looking for what is the kind of perspective you can bring and how can you contribute in the world. And maybe INSEAD can be part of that journey. And I think the second part of your question was about, could you just,
how did you make yourself stand out? Because, INSEAD has a bit of, at least as an outsider perception, consultant, and national experience, yada, yada, yada. So how did you sort of stand out from the crowd? Like, how did you make your passion for INSEAD? Because you've been thinking about INSEAD for 2 years, right? How did you make that shine through your application process?
So I think that was also one part you asked me earlier was why INSEAD? How did I know for sure? That's because I was very clear I wanted to do a shorter MBA. I wanted to do an MBA in less than a year or 1 year time. The US MBAs are usually a lot more. They touch close to 2 years. So that was already a whole geography that I had eliminated. And so I was looking at European business schools altogether. And INSEAD in the European space, and at par with the US business schools, INSEAD ranked pretty high. I really attended a lot of the sessions that they had online. So I really liked the energy, the vibe I was getting. And one thing which is for me, which was the final factor, was the courses were there, everything was there. I did all my research, but the people that I spoke to that came from that network, and everybody talks about this. It was really surprising. On my first day at business school also, somebody asked us this question, one of our professors, that, what was your experience interacting with the alumni at INSEAD? And people in my class said that, we wrote emails to, somebody shared their story that they wrote emails to almost 20 different alums from INSEAD, and about 18, 19 of them responded. So that really goes to show what kind of a network you're joining and being a part of. So I was like, that was just the final stop for me. I needed to be part of something that big, and that was going to stay with me for the rest of my life.
Awesome. Thank you. This is super helpful.
Thanks, Dikshika. Aditya, if you would like to go next.
Hi.
Hi, Aditya.
Hi. Okay, so I'm an architect, and but the question was like, designing is very different from, a course which is much more logical. How do designers, have a scope in kind of, in MBA courses? Because
Vidit, would you
especially
like
at
to take this?
INSEAD.
Hi, Aditya. So
Yeah.
I think first of all, I'll break this down into two parts. Okay. So I think the first part, how valuable the course is going to be, or how valuable this background is to the MBA. So, briefly, I think Sanjana touched upon it previously. So if to get into an MBA course, or, do an MBA course or MBA school, you don't need a specific background. I know, like, especially coming out from India, it's very celebratory to have, like engineering, consulting, and, tech sort of backgrounds, but that's not all the backgrounds that people come along with. The whole idea behind doing an MBA is you want to get in four walls with a bunch of people who are coming from different backgrounds. So no two people are going to be exactly the same. So that's an advantage, right? So when you look, so that's sort of like a broader answer to your question. But technically, when you're actually going to get your head down to do your application, I think the good part is there's not going to be a whole lot of competition standing against you, because you're not coming from engineering side, right? So architecture, I think it will add a bit very different value, but that is something that a lot of different schools look for, how different the background is for each and every individual. Having said that, don't count yourself out just because you don't have those finance backgrounds or those backgrounds. I didn't have it either. I'm coming from a public sector background. I didn't study finance. I didn't do tech. I didn't do consulting. I worked on public policy and planning in climate change, which was completely different. I didn't deal with any C-suite members. I dealt with political leaders and counselors, completely different. So don't count yourself out. I think this is a really good chance for you to see what kind of value you can add to the cohort, and this is exactly what they would be looking at in the application.
Just if I can ask one more question.
Please go ahead, Aditya.
Yeah, so one thing is like we as a designers, we operate at a very small scale. We're actually a bunch of 20 to 30 max. We operate at very small projects. But what I was researching for is a lot of consulting companies work for public sector, but only in real estate, so they have a scale to operate. So down the line, what I think is, do designers bring in value, or it's, the scale also matters of what your experiences deals with?
To answer your question on the design, I think designing background brings a lot of value, right? They bring a lot of creativity to the problems, right? So there's two things. So once you get into an MBA school, right, you don't really have to just pursue consulting. You do have an options to explore different career opportunities and where you want to go. So you can actually go back to a bigger organization, which is in architecture, or you can go into consulting, which is absolutely different from architecture, right? So you do get these opportunities. Secondly, in terms of the value, as you go through the application process, these are some of the stuff that you would actually go through, retrospecting what value and you can add to the cohort, to the application. Creativity is one part. You have worked in smaller teams. That means you're entrepreneurial. you're probably taken a lot more initiatives in the bigger organizations, right? Third, you probably had a lot more chances and opportunities to speak to senior leadership team because you work in smaller organizations. You probably work closer to senior managers or directors. So you took upon more responsibilities. So just by having this conversation, we can highlight like 4 to 5, key areas that and the values that you can add to the application and to INSEAD as a whole, which would be of extremely interest of the admissions committee and for the alumni going forward. So I think it's a really good advantage. Having said that, just based on sensing the kind of questions you're asking, I would highly suggest don't undersell yourself. I think you have a very good background. You have a lot of good qualities. You have good experience. Don't consider that you're coming from a small organization, so that's going to be an advantage.
Okay.
So take those stuff out, and then if you want to apply for it, ask yourself why you want to go to certain MBA school, and then go for it.
Okay. Thanks, Vidit.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Vinay. Thank you, Aditya. Ruchba,
Yeah. Hi. My name is Rukba. And actually, so I come from a government and public policy background. And I've worked mainly in policy making with governments in India. So, but I know that INSEAD has, they focus a lot on,
I
sorry,
will,
am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to know, I know NCR looks at international exposure. So I just wanted to understand how much emphasis is put on that, because I've had limited exposure professionally when it comes to, to like working with international clients. So yeah.
With it, you wanna, I think with your experience also with some other candidates, it'll be really great.
Okay. So look, I think in terms of the international experience, so I had a similar challenge when I was applying as well. I think what I did is 2 things. Okay, and this is exactly what I recommend to other candidates as well. I think the first thing is really highlight any sort of interactions you have had. You said you had limited, not no experience, right? So limited experience.
Mhm.
So make sure you highlight your limited experience you have had with international clients or anything international in your application. It's not the amount of the international experience, but it's the quality of the international experience you've had in your work experience. So for example, it's not, I've been to like 10 countries or worked across 5 geographical locations, but exactly what did I do or what did I achieve? So even if say, I was in London and I worked in, India for 4 months, but the impact had been huge and I learned a whole lot of stuff in those 4 months that I took back to my previous organization in London. That is something that's going to be counted, and that is something that needs to be, phrased uh, articulately when you write in the application.
Okay.
So you don't have to have travel abroad, any interactions you've had abroad, any tool you have developed for a client abroad, or even, a couple of meetings you've had with a client abroad, because not all the candidates, from all the batches are going to have like so much of international experience,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, sounds good. So just one more question. So what is your advice for someone like, someone is me, just that has like a sabbatical or a gap in their CV, and how would INSEAD look at that? Or, what your suggestions are for, and it's more than 3 months. So which is why, because I also want to pivot from policy to strategy, which is why it's taking that long to stick a job. So which is why I just wanted to understand, from your experiences.
Okay, so I'll shut down my experiences, and then Sanjana and Ashmita, you can add your thoughts as well. So I would take a look at it from 2 perspectives. Okay, so the first one, to start with, sabbatical and career gap are absolutely okay. A lot of people take that. That's completely fine. The point is how you sort of communicate that gap or that sabbatical to the admissions committee in your application. So the first point is, during those 3 to 4 months or however long you've taken the gap, what have you done? Have you volunteered somewhere? Have you taught something somewhere? Were you doing an internship? Or were you doing an online course? Just highlight all those stuff. And you have to explain in the application, why did you do that? How did it help in your subsequent steps in your career? Or how this is going to help in your career in the next, 1 year or 6 months. So as long as you explain that, that's completely fine. Okay. The second part is if you haven't done anything, if there's some sort of family emergency that you had because of which you have to take time off, that's completely fine as well. I had a little bit of that gap because of family emergency, which I had clearly specified under the we have an optional essay called additional information, I think, in the INSEAD application.
Yeah.
So that's where I explained why there was certain gap regarding family emergency, and it was fine. People understand that.
Okay, that's good to know. All right. So just be honest is the general advice, I'm guessing.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you don't really have to work hard to stand out because you're already standing out. I mean, you're unique your own way, right? But people start worrying about how should I write the application so that people like my application, and that's where they lose the track of what they want to write or what they want to show. So just be truthful, but explain it properly as why there were certain gaps and what did you do and what impact, positive impact it has had in your career since then.
All right. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thanks, Rajpa. Thanks, Vidit. I apologize for the confusion that happened in the middle. My internet connection has not been kind to me. One aspect that I would just like to highlight before we go forward, because Rajpa, you brought up this very interesting question, is the aspect of branding. It's my favorite subject in the world, so I'm going to talk about it for a second here. Everything in your profile, literally everything in your profile can be presented in a very average manner and can be presented in a story that makes an impact. And how you brand yourself and how you put yourself out there is what makes for a good application. That is what your consultant mostly works on. They don't change your stories. They bring forward the best aspects that you might not be able to see. So sometimes sabbaticals bring out really interesting stories. There is a lady I'm in touch with, and she's planning to apply next year, and she's taking a sabbatical to go to Thailand to work with elephants. I want to know how many applications will have that. And I want to see one AdComs person try and ignore that. It's impossible. It's such a great aspect to bring in. So human aspects are great aspects to bring in. That's a general rule in all applications. Vidit and Sanjana would certify that even for INSEAD. So moving to the next question. Okay, so we have one Zoom user asking a question and then one iPhone. What I would request you all is to come up and tell us your names first and then ask your question. So Zoom user, you could go first, as odd as this sounds.
Hi, everyone. For some reason, I'm unable to access the camera.
That's all right. Could you tell us your name?
Hi, my name is Jyoti.
Hi,
I am a radiation safety officer and a nuclear medicine technologist. So my question is regarding the work experience. Actually, if we count till today, my overall work experience is roughly around 2.5 years. But in the managerial position, I have been around 1.5 years. But so my question is, should I count the work experience till today when I'm actually applying, or should I count till when the college starts? Because it is 1 year extra in the same managerial position. So that's why I'm a little curious to know.
Sanjana, what do you think? This is the other end of work experience now.
So your college applications will have, Jyoti, the option. They will clearly specify when you do your years of experience. They'll clearly specify till the date at which you will join your MBA program. So if your MBA joining is next year, August or September, August for INSEAD, or say whichever intake you're applying for, it would be at that point how many years of experience you'll have.
Okay. Also, another question is, since my work experience is slightly on the lower side, do you think it will be a disadvantage for my application?
No, I think, in the previous one also with its answered with Rupa's question, that it's such an interesting already, I don't even want to deep dive into what you actually do. The fact that you're already at a managerial role. I think all three of us were quite impressed with just the work, what you do when you told us. So I really don't think
Thank
so.
you.
And most of the others on the call and you as well, I just say, do sign up for the profile evaluation with MBA Beyond. It's really helpful because what they do is that you will get advice based on your profile, and you can ask your questions based on your profile, and even things like this: what are your strengths, what to show, what works well for you, and that might actually be quite helpful for you all when you're applying to business schools.
Okay. Another question is, I'm sorry for so many questions, but the last one, I promise. So another question is the scholarship essay that you mentioned. Can you give in some tips that we can particularly focus on to increase our chances?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my scholarship essays, I tried to cover three grounds when I was writing them. One was I wanted to show that academically or merit-wise, how I was and how I have been as a student. The second area I tried to touch upon was my professional experience. So how as a professional my contributions have been. And the third I tried to cover were more of like my personal, I would say, motivations and where I come from and the things that I've done on a personal level. And so for those three reasons, I talked about why I would be deserving of a scholarship and how the one thing that which I think really helps in these scholarship applications is to show that if you were to get that scholarship, at the end of the day, it is a value or money that is coming towards you. What are you going to do to give back in return, or how you are going to add value once you have gotten that scholarship? How are you going to contribute either to INSEAD or to say other people outside of this whole ecosystem as well? But that really is helpful in showing that why you are deserving is one aspect, but how you will give back also now that you get something from them. So that was, I think, the way that I worked around for all of the scholarship applications I wrote.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. So everybody, just to let you know, we have just 8 minutes to go. But don't worry if your questions are not answered. You will get an email from me after this session. Please reply to that email if you have any more questions, or even better, schedule a profile evaluation call with one of our experts. They are from top MBA schools, top B schools, and you will be able to ask all your questions one-on-one in detail, right? So don't worry about that. We'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. So in queue, Arnav and then Aniket, and we'll see if we are able to reach to other people. So Arnav, if you could quickly ask your question, that would be great.
Hi, hello.
Hi,
First of all,
Arnav.
thank you for organizing this really informative session. It's been really helpful. So, just giving a background of me. So, I have sort of a similar experience as Sanjana. I work in the tech consulting sector and in one of the big four companies. And I have worked for 7.5 to 8 years in total, and I have 2 years of experience in the same company uh, as an AML compliance analyst in the finance division as well. But mostly of my experience is on the tech consulting side. So, and I'm planning to give my GMAT in the near future. So, my application is mostly going to be uh, in round three, like Sanjana did earlier. So, my question specifically over here is to Sanjana is like, what do you think are my chances over there? Like for a person with different, experience backgrounds as mine, because I'm not really sure like how I can uh, be the appropriate candidate over there at INSEAD.
um it's like, first thing to I'll say is it's not like you will be appropriate for them. You have 8 years of experience, you've been working. I'm sure if really we were to deep dive, I'm sure there's a lot that we will already start picking out of your contributions, what you've done. You're already in the consulting side of things. So there's like, it's like a match made in heaven consulting in INSEAD. So I really
Okay.
wouldn't be worried in that sense. And I think I would obviously love to know more about what you've been doing and maybe give you personalized advice. So do book a profile evaluation with me or any of the other profile consultants, and then
Right.
they can give you more advice on your chances. But I I'd just say based on it, we just have to put your best qualities, your strengths, your work ex forward in the application, make a strong application, and of course
Right.
back that up with a pretty solid GMAT score if you can, and
Right.
then it's on INSEAD, of course. But it's not. I think you would be able to find a lot of interesting things from your work ex of 8 years. I wouldn't be worried if I was you.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I think that pretty much answers it. So, I think the next step would be the profile evaluation part. So, yep. Thank you. Thank you all then.
Thanks, Arnab.
Thank you,
Aniket,
Ashmita.
if you could ask your question.
Hello. Hi, good evening, team. Thank you for organizing this wonderful session. First of all, Sanjana, with it has been really helpful. Currently, I am working in tech consultancy, like GS Associates, and I have around close to like more than 5 years of experience. And by the time I join, hopefully, if I join the program, I will be having close to 6 years of work experience. So, the currently the challenging part for me is I have not given the GMAT yet, and I'm focusing on like the last phase of my preparation. So my question revolves around what should be the score that I should aim for, given that my background is close to like consulting, kind of tech consulting, and what are the main focus areas that I should focus on while applying for round two, and what will be the chances for me to apply for round three?
Vidit,
Vidit, would
would
you
you
like to?
Okay, thanks, guys. Look, Aniket, I think for the first of all, as I said before, and I think Sanjana will be able to better answer this question because, of course, she's coming from the similar background as yours with tech consulting, right? But broadly speaking, the first thing I would say, focus more on the essays and your stories part because that's more important. It's not going to happen that you would score 760 or 800 on 800 in GMAT and then your stories are bad. You won't get selected. There's no way. So you really have to focus on, your showing your personality and your stories in the application. I think that should be your primary focus. And then secondary, we have been preparing for the GMAT. So even if you score a little bit lower in the GMAT, like 650, 660, but your overall story is very compelling and impactful, then you have a fabulous chance to get into INSEAD. So I would put the first priority on your application, like the stories, the essays, how you are writing those stories, you're portraying themselves, the skills that you're portraying in the application. That's the first priority. And then second, I would put as the GMAT preparation of the GMAT score.
Okay.
Right. Anything you want to add? Sanjana, I think would be helpful as well because guys coming from the same background. So
Yeah, I think you said you were in the final stages of your GMAT prep. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're already taking mocks. Have you started that?
Like I'll be taking first mock this weekend, but yeah,
Okay, amazing. So I
and the
think once
last
you take that mock, you can pretty reasonably estimate how much time you can take the actual exam in, considering you are really at the final stages of your prep. So I'd actually say maybe after you're done with your mock, knowing where you stand, you might want to consider applying in round two. You have the years of experience. You can obviously do a profile evaluation as well, followed by that. And
Right.
try and see if you could just make a round two application. It would just strengthen your chances.
And what is the score that I should aim for? Like the ballpark figure, close to plus minus 20.
I mean, coming from somebody with a 680, it's really ironic, even if I tell you. But I think, obviously the right answer is always for anybody, just the higher, the better. So anything 700 plus you can do for any business schools, it's always a great thing because a very good score or a high score is always good to have. And in fact, in some cases, it even helps your scholarship chances, the case that you're making, because like I said, in my scholarship applications, I did talk about the academic, the merit part of why I deserve a scholarship. So you could, it goes a long way if you get a great GMAT score. But of course, if that's not the case and you are like somebody like me, then you just have to really double down on your application and really showcase other strengths and qualities that can maybe make up for it. Because I did also showcase other aspects of how I was not from the tech background, but how I upskilled, how I worked really hard in tech to cover up for so I did make up for that in other areas. And so go for it, just try and push it to the best score that you can get.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aniket. And that brings our time to an end. An hour went by pretty quickly. So everybody else who wants to ask a question, Atul, Sanjana, Manan, Kuldeep, everybody, I would highly encourage you to respond to my email and we'll take up your queries specifically. If you are yet to schedule a profile evaluation call, please do that so that our experts can answer your questions directly. That's always extremely helpful. They are there at the B schools or they have graduated from the B schools that you all want to go to. So nobody better to answer the questions. And thank you again so much, Vidit and Sanjana. It's been such a pleasure talking to you all. And I hope we get to do this again.
Thanks, Ashmita. Thanks, Vidit. Have a nice
Thanks,
day.
Ashmita. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck with your
Thank
schooling,
you.
Sanjana. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.